This is session 4, so we have the hardest part out of the way, I would say. If you made it to the first 3 sessions, then you're probably able to send custom xAPI statements from a storyline course. In this session specifically, we're looking at how to get more context around those statements and make them a bit more professional, I guess you could say. So that when other people are looking at the statements, they have a better idea of what's happening in them and how they're related to other statements. And so this session isn't going to be super exciting. No worries, Jonathan, if you gotta dip out. Yeah, but this one won't be as exciting because we're not really collecting any, really new information. We're just adding, more context. After this, though, like next week and the following weeks, we're going to look at how to collect open text responses, duration data, which is one of my favorites, quiz score info. So we'll get there soon, but this one is pretty important. So, we don't want to skip it. I see that there is someone who hasn't sent an xAPI statement from an articulate storyline course yet. You might be in a little over your head with this session if you didn't see the first 3. But if the only problem is that if you followed along and you still were having trouble, don't worry, because I think we'll have some time at the end of this session to do some troubleshooting. Again, I don't think it will take the full hour to cover what we're going to cover here. So, I'll just hang around. And if anyone was having trouble getting that statement to send from last week, because I did get messages throughout the week, and it's always small issues. So if you're not getting it to work, don't think like, it's just not going to work from you. It is something, and with code, you have to be like really particular. So it's probably something small. I mean, just yesterday we figured out that someone spelled their function just slightly differently in the JavaScript file than they did in the storyline course. So yeah, I think we'll go ahead and get started. What we're going to want to have open for the session is the storyline course from last week, where the user enters their name and email and then selects one of the quiz options, one of the question options. And we also want to open that xAPI statement.js file. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so this is the xAPI-statement.javascript file. If this is brand new to you, you might want to hop out of this session and go and view the first one, because we're not going to have time to rebuild this from scratch, basically. Let me open this in another window. If everyone has this open, we're going to go ahead and start adding to it. So particularly for this session, we're going to be looking at this object. So our actor is good. We know the person's name. We know their email address because they're entering it in the storyline course. Our verb is good. We can pass in the ID and we can pass in the display. So Devlin answered in this case because we're answering a question. But now in the object, let's see what we have. We have an ID, so we know it is, I think the IDs we were using, This storyline file looks a little different than last week. I had to rebuild it right before the session because I guess I didn't save it. But here's just as a quick refresher, we're executing some JavaScript to pass in these arguments into our function. So we're passing in a verb ID, an object, and an object ID. So our verb is answered, and we pulled our verb ID from that online resource. But I did get some good feedback this week from Jason Hogg, who he started Veracity LRS, the one I've been demoing here. And the resource I've been telling you all to use, let's see, is out of date. So I've been telling you to use the tin can registry.tincan.api, and we were going to verbs, and then we were searching for our verbs here. But you see all these verbs right here, the activity stream ones. These are out of date, and they're not really used anymore. And there's a much better resource, which is xapi.vocab.pub. And this is going to be the profile server. This is where the most up-to-date verbs are. So I'm sorry, I directed you all here. This is what I'd been using, but This one is more up to date, and it works the same way. We just go to browse, verbs, and it's another list of all of those verbs. And we still find this answered verb here. We're going to use this one, indicates that the actor replied to a question. So just make a note of this, xapi.vocab.pub. That is the resource we want to be using to get our verb IDs. And like you'll see in this session, our activity types. So we'll get there soon. But basically what all we're doing right now is adding the object ID and the object name, but we can add more information to this object, and that's what we're covering here. So first of all, we can say what type of object our object is. And in 99% of cases, I would say it's going to be an activity. So it's the object type, that's the property. And it's a child of the object. Let me just double check that. Yeah, object type, just like this. And our object type is activity. So this one's really easy. Make sure you add a comma after this definition object is defined. And then, as a string, we're going to add this key. Remember, JSON is key value pairs. And our key is object type. And the type itself, which is the value, is activity. So there are, and I'll tell you what, this probably isn't super helpful without context, but let me pull this up from my tutorial. Here are the different types of, here are the other types of objects we can have. So we're using activity, but the object can also be an agent. In my example, I give here, Devlin greeted Susie or someone. So if you're performing the action on another person, like greeting them or hiring them or promoting them, then you're not gonna, the object isn't an activity, it's an agent, like a person. So I hope that is self-explanatory enough. It can also be a group. So Devlin greeted management, for example, or Devlin joined team 1. Okay, or Devlin got, yeah, you get the idea. So, these are other types when when you're acting on a person or a group. And then these ones are much less common, but I think we should mention them. We're not going to, I haven't used these ones, but these are the other possibilities. A statement reference. So statement ref is a type of object where you're performing an action on an existing statement ID. So like if I'm reporting a statement for a review or something. So Devlin reported, and then it would just be the statement ID. So again, this is much more niche, not many cases where you're gonna need to use this one. And then also a sub statement. So yeah, they're used to imply future intent. So again, I haven't used this one before, but here's how it would be used. Devlin is the actor, planned could be the verb, and then it would be a whole statement here. Devlin wrote xAPI tutorial. So it's like Devlin's planning to do this full statement at some point in the future. So it implies future intent. What we're focusing on is just the activity type, the activity object type. That's why you hear these, these are often used synonymously a lot. So object and activity. So actor, verb, object, actor, verb, activity. You might, I don't know if you might hear that, but the activity is referring to this object in most cases. Is everyone good with that? I'm going to pull up the chat. Really simple to tell the statement that it's going to be an activity. We don't have to add the language code or anything here. That's all it is. So if we're good with that, we're going to start adding some more information to this object. And we're going to add it inside of this definition object. Okay, so right now we have the name, and we're passing the name as a parameter to the function. But we can also add a description. So just add a comma after the name line, add this description key. And this is also going to be an object because we need that language code. Question in my sample course. And the description can be whatever string you want. It's just, You're just adding some information to the statement to help whoever is looking at that statement make sense of it. So this information is to make it easier for humans to understand the statement. And again, I just added this in here because using this context. So we're sending, Devlin answered choice A in this question. And again, this isn't the best way to do this. Once we get to the quiz score info tutorial, I'm going to show you how to structure the statement better. So it's going to be like Devlin answered question 1, and we're going to hold the actual response in a different part of the xAPI statement. But for now, we're just adding a description to make more sense of that. This is just a question in my sample course, so I'm just going to add that string here. And again, we need the language code because we need to know what language we're including this in. So if we have, if we have a multilingual audience or people from different, regions or countries, we want them to be able to select their language if we want to add more language options. But in this case, we're just going to leave it with English. And we're going to add one more thing to this. We're going to add the activity type, okay? So when this object type is an activity, we can add a type property here to say what type of activity it is. And again, feel free to ask questions. The language gets confusing here. We're working inside of a JSON object. We have a JSON object labeled object. We're saying what type of object the object is. And then we're also saying what type of activity it is. So it took me a while of getting my head around this before I actually, got a better understanding. And it is kind of weird where these items are placed. But again, this type property, we're only adding here when the object type is activity. And if you were paying attention earlier in this session, you'll know where we get this type from, and that is this vocab server. So instead of looking at verbs, we're going to look at activity types. So I'll just paste this in the chat. So similar enough, this is going to have, and you can see some of these types of activity types. So is this an assessment? An assessment is an activity type that determines a learner's mastery of a particular subject area. It typically has one or more questions. So we're talking about a specific question. So this seems a bit not granular enough. So let's Control F. We'll look for question. Here we go. Question. A question is typically part of an assessment and requires a response from the learner, a response that is evaluated for correctness. So we'll get to that evaluated for correctness in a later tutorial, and we'll actually hold in the statement whether or not the response is correct. But we're not there yet. But we do know that this is our activity type. It is a question. So I'll just copy this. And yeah, as you can see, this is a URI. I know that concept is confusing for some people, but this is one of those things where you can just pull it from a public resource like this. So I'll put quotes around it and paste it in here. And if you followed along with this, this is the information we wanted to add today, saying what type of object it is. And this can be an activity, an agent, a group, a sub-statement, or a statement reference. In most cases, all of your use cases, it's probably going to be an activity unless you're doing some much more advanced stuff with xAPI. So this can stay as it is. And then we're adding these two pieces to the definition object, which is within the object object. We're adding some human readable language here so that someone looking at the statement can make sense of it. And we're adding this URI saying what type of activity the actor is engaging in. Okay, any questions about that before we move on? Yeah, I just went on like a 15-minute rampage with all of this, and there are no questions. So I think that means I'm either, not making any sense here, or everyone's getting it really well. Previously, we added description object. I think the object should be right here. So it would be definition, and then the first item in the definition object would be the name. Is that right? Like this. We're about to replace the hard code. I was just adding this in to show what the data will look like before we actually replace this. Yeah, because where we're going from here is we're actually going to add more parameters here, and we're gonna, because this is going to change. You know, when we're looking at when we're selecting this view cheat sheet option, we don't want to say that our activity type is a question, because a cheat sheet isn't a question, it's a resource or a reference. And same thing with the description. When we're clicking on this cheat sheet option, we don't want to say that it's a question in my sample course, because it's not. So that's right where we're going next, Sam. Thanks for that question. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's add some more parameters to this. So we know the verb is going to change. The verb ID is going to change, just like the object and the object ID. The object type is not going to change, because it's all going to be a type of activity. But the object description and the activity type will change. So let's add some parameters. Object description and activity type. So see, if you're using Visual Studio Code or another, decent code editor, these parameters will change color to indicate that they're not being used in the function currently. So just a little way that our code editor is helping us keep track of things here. And make sure these parameters are separated by commas. That's important. The space is not important, so don't worry if you have a space or not. It just makes it a bit more readable. Once you've added them here, we're just going to be replacing them in the xAPI statement like we did last week. So we can get rid of this type, and we will put activity type. And same here, we can replace this string here where it says question in my sample course and put object description. So this is like how our final code. If you have this, then you're done with the hard code in this JavaScript file for today. I do want to show you something else. I don't think we're going to add this code to our statement. This is Visual Studio Code. I can post a link. Yeah, I was playing around with like a basic text editor before this, but I mean, this one's free, and yeah, it's great with all the color coding, and it automatically adds brackets for you, like the closing ones, so you don't forget them. It's really good. It like auto indents for you when you do enter. It just jumps right here. Really helpful. I just think you need to make sure it's saved as a JavaScript file, or it's not going to do all of this stuff for you. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions about this before we, I can go ahead and show us how it works in Storyline as a quick refresher on that. Do we want to do that, or do you want me to show you? Do we want to, publish it in Storyline and see how we can get it working and look at the statement in the Learning Record Store, or do we want to look at this context object? There's a lot of brackets and stuff here, so we can do either one. Why object type is outside object? So object type isn't outside of object, it's outside of the description, the definition object. So you see how this definition object is ending right here? Object type is still part of object. The closing bracket for object isn't until right after that. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so if you went through these tutorials a bit ago, yeah, it might be hard without a refresher. Okay, we'll publish it and look at it in Storyline. That might help you to Dahlia. Oh, hi Dahlia. Cool. Okay, so let's look at it. Dahlia, if you don't have this code already, I think it's gonna be kind of hard to follow this, but let's do this. So whoever does have this code, let's go ahead and save this file. We'll hop over to Storyline now. Oh, and make sure you save this file, because some people were having trouble. Like, I think they were moving their file over to their output folder without saving it, and that was causing problems. So just save this file, hop over to your Storyline course, and we're going to look at these JavaScript triggers that we're executing. So we'll just start with choice A. If everyone has this. If you don't have this, I'll show you what we're going to do from scratch. We're going to copy this send statement part of the function where it has all of the parameters. So we're copying from where it says send statement all the way to that closing parenthesis, but not including that curly bracket. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hop over to storyline. And whenever we want to execute whenever we want to send one of these xAPI statements, we need to do an execute JavaScript trigger. So I'm going to pretend that this one didn't have anything. Let me just show you this. This is what the trigger will look like. Action execute JavaScript when the user clicks this rectangle. Click on where it says JavaScript to open up the code. I'm going to delete all of that just for people who might need a little refresher. And we're going to paste in this function with all of these parameters. So what these parameters are, again, they're just placeholders in the code. So we're going to decide here what we want the verb to be, what we want the object to be, etc., all the way through. And when we pass that, it's going to replace these placeholders in the actual xAPI statement object. Okay, so again, it's a refresher for most of you. So again, we get our verb from this new profile now. So we want to go to browse verbs, and we answered. So we copy this answered verb, and that will be the verb ID. The verb itself is just a plain English verb. So in quotes, I'm going to say that, answered. The verb ID we'll put in quotes as well. The object, again, this isn't the, I want to stress this isn't the best way to talk about people answering questions, because the object would be the question, but we're just doing this for now. It's all going to come together, and this is going to be a much better looking statement when we get to that session, I think next week or the week after. So choice A, the object ID, I think we're just using example.com, example.com/choice A. Okay, now we're on to the new parameters. Now let me close these quotes, or this will all be broken. Object description. So now this is where I would put that description. I would say question in my sample quiz. And that can be whatever you want. Just make sure it's surrounded by quotes. And for activity type, again, this one is a question. So we would go to this activity types resource, type in question. Here we are. And then we find the questions URI. This is a unique identifier. It looks like a URL, but it doesn't have to actually resolve to a public-facing web page. You see? And if anyone has questions around this, let me know, because some people did. I think people are having trouble. If you don't find if you don't find your activity type on here, for example, or if you need to come up with an object ID that works for your organization or your course. If you have questions about that, just drop it in the chat and I'll try to explain that more clearly. So now that I have this activity type, URI, I need to go back to storyline. It's going to be surrounded by quotes, and there we go. So we're just replacing those placeholder words with the actual values that we want to be included in the xAPI statement. And as you can see, this is getting to be a lot. We're up to what, 6 parameters now up here. And in the following tutorials, we're just going to be adding more and more and more. So I think in week 8, I show you how we can manage this more efficiently and how we can break this one send statement function down into multiple smaller functions. And I do that based off of the verb I want to send. So you'll see in my this is a sample function for my xAPI challenges app, where I send xAPI statements every time someone answers one of the quiz questions in these challenge quizzes associated with each of these xAPI tutorials. So I have a function called send answered. And the only parameters I have are the object ID, and the user's response, which we're going to get to later too. So you'll see here I have my verb filled in because this isn't going to change. I'm only going to use this function send answered when someone answers a question. So these ones stay the same. The activity type is a question, so I don't need to include that as a parameter. So again, we're going to get there at a later session. Don't think every time you're going to need to keep track of like all of these different parameters, but that is what we're going to do for now. So, so hang tight. So you just saw me do that one from scratch. I'm just going to paste in these last two pieces, the object to description and the activity type, because we're going to add this to our other execute JavaScript triggers. So I'm going to copy that. Okay, we're going to go to choice B, and then we're going to open up the JavaScript executing here. I'm going to go right after that closing quote and paste what I copied. Again, make sure that comma is in there. Question in my sample quiz, and yeah, the activity type is a question. So we're looking good there. I'm going to do the same for choice C. And now the one that will be a little bit different is this view cheat sheet option. So we'll look at that JavaScript. I'll paste in my new code. And this one isn't a question in my sample quiz. It's a cheat sheet in my sample quiz. And it's not a question, it's a resource. So I'm going to go to the activity types. I'm going to search for a resource. Here we are. A resource is a generic item that the actor may use for something. It's recommended to use a more specific activity type. I didn't find one particularly pertaining to a cheat sheet or a quick guide. So we're just going to use this resource URI. And I'm going to get rid of the question one and paste in this resource one. Okay. So let me see if there are any questions. Can you paste this? Can I paste that here, please? Why are there duplicates in the vocab list? That's a good, let's see. What duplicate was there answered? Okay, yeah, so there are two answered verbs. There's this w3id.org one. Provide the required responses to a test, quiz, or question. Use with the KSA extension. So this is like deeper. This is talking about adding extensions. This seems to have a much more specific use case. Maybe this is, let's see. I'm not sure when we would use this one over this one. I know that this is the common one used in e-learning experiences. This one seems to be part of something more specific, maybe a profile or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm sure someone knows the answer to that, but I don't really know. But I do know that this is the one we want to use for e-learning stuff. So that's a good question. I wonder that myself, why, you know. What else? Where exactly are you in that site to pull the links? So I go to browse at the top. Once you're on the site, yeah, it's kind of confusing because when you go through the homepage, you don't really see where to go, but it's this browse tab. And then the verbs are where we get the URIs for the verb ID, and activity types are where we get the URIs for the activity type. You know, it's not really an ID, but I guess you can call it that. Okay, so is everyone up to speed? Oh, if your browser window is too narrow, those dropdowns do not appear. Oh, okay. So yeah, if it looks like this, you have to use the menu icon, and then you'll just go to verbs or activity types. But from here, I'm just going to publish it again, and it'll be a refresher on how to add that, add the code we need. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to publish it. We're going to publish it for web, and I'm just going to send it to my desktop. So not Review 360. It doesn't need to be a SCORM package, but it can be. So this can be a SCORM package, a tin can package, and we could add the stuff there. But we're just going to keep it simple and do it for web. So I'll publish it to the desktop. Can you show your full JavaScript one more time for A, B, or C? Yeah. So we'll look at B. So we're executing that send statement function. And again, it all lines up to these parameters. So answered is the verb. This is the verb ID. Make sure the commas are outside of the quotes or this won't work. And make sure each of these different items is surrounded by quotes. Choice B, we're saying, is the object. We're just giving example.com/choice-b for the object ID. Question in my sample quiz is our description, and here's the URI we pulled for that site for the activity type. Okay. So once that course is published, here I published it to my desktop. Here's the output. Well, we know we're going to need to edit this story.html file to link to our JavaScript files. So I'm just going to open that with my code editor right now so that I have it open. And here's what I always do. So we also know that we need this xAPI statement.javascript file we've been working on in our output file. So so go to wherever in your desktop you've been working on that file. Make sure you save it. So do Control S, Command S if you're on a Mac. File save. Just make sure this thing is saved. Then go to wherever it is on your computer you were editing it. Or actually, here's another way you could do it. You could just do File Save As once you've saved it in the original spot, and go to the Storyline output folder. So see, this is what I just published from Storyline, and just it's already called xAPI-statement.javascript, so we're good to go. Just save it there. So now we have our statement file, JavaScript file in there. But as you probably remember, we also need that xAPI wrapper file. So what I usually just pull that from what I already have on my computer. So let's see. This is what we were working on last week. So I'll just pull it from there. xAPIwrapper.min.js. So if anyone needs the link, I can give you the link to the official download. Let's see. I usually just do xAPIwrapper. And here it is. And then you can go down to download the latest release. And then you just need to click on this file right here, and it will download for you. So I can paste that in here. I mean, everyone probably has it, but just in case you don't. And I'll copy this. I'll send this link too. That's the direct link. If you click on that one, it will just download the file for you. But what we need to do is we need to make sure we get it in this output folder. And what I do again, instead of linking the files from scratch in the story.html file, I usually just go to an old project. So let's see, this is what we were working on last week. I'll open up this story.html file, open with code. I'll scroll down to the bottom right above this closing body tag, because that's where we linked our files, and I just copy these script tags. So I Control-C, copy them from here. I go over to the story.html file for the new course that we just published, and I scroll down to the bottom, and I add a few line breaks right above this closing body tag and paste it in here. So I'll paste this in the chat. We paste those script tags right above the closing body tag. And once you get the hang of this and you know where your files are, like I'm telling you, this takes literally 60 seconds. Like it's literally just copying getting these two files in the folder, and then adding these script tags to the story.html file, and that's all there is to it. So I hope seeing this again makes you, it's a good refresher and makes you see that you can do this really quick. Because once you get the hang of it, sending these statements, once we have our file as we want it and we don't need to write any more code, because again, we still need to work on it a little bit to really bring it up to, professional grade and put the response in the right part of the statement. But once you have that down, it's literally just a matter of executing some JavaScript in Storyline, swapping out some words for some of these IDs and stuff, and then just modifying the output folder. And this is where the part we've all been waiting for. I just opened this up in, wait, is this the new one? Oh no, this is the old one. So let's go to the new one. Collect activity info. We're going to open up the story.html file. Name and email. So my name is Devlin Peck. Devlinpeck@gmail.com. I'm going to submit. Oh, I didn't add this trigger because again, I rebuilt this right before the session. I'm just going to use the next button to go to the next slide. What is the answer? Well, first let's view the cheat sheet, and let me go over here to my LRS. Again, you probably have this configured from last week. We need to make sure that this conf object has your endpoint and your authorization. So go ahead and sign into Veracity LRS if you didn't already have this open. It's lrs.io. We're going to go ahead and see if our code works, though. I'm going to open up the test LRS that I created last week. I'm going to go to xAPI data statements. Okay. These are last week's statements you see 7 days ago. But now let's go ahead and view the cheat sheet. The answer is C. Let's see, do we have that information here? I'm going to refresh, and you can see Devlin Peck viewed the cheat sheet 5 seconds ago. And not only that, but let's see, we can see all of our extra info here now. Okay, so here's our definition object. We can see that its name is cheat sheet, right? It's a cheat sheet in my sample quiz, and we know that it's a resource now by looking at this activity type. Okay, so that's why it's cool. Maybe someone else is looking at this and they're just like, oh, a cheat sheet, like what is that? Because maybe it's not as clear. Adding this activity type makes it more clear. And again, resource is pretty broad, but at least we know now, okay, this is something they're referencing to answer this question, I guess. And again, we're gonna add more context down the line. And we know that the object type is an activity. So there we go. And we can play around some more. Close cheat sheet, I'll answer choice C. Again, let's see, did it pop up here? Devlin Peck answered choice C. Another cool thing about Veracity is that we can modify what we see here. So right now it shows actor, verb, object. Say we want to include that description in this stream. All we have to do is go to the bottom. Wait a minute, where is it? Oh, wait, let's do configure. Oh, okay, they updated it, actually. It used to be at the bottom. Now you just click configure. And you can turn on what you want to show in this field. These are all different parts that you can include on the xAPI statement. We're going to get to all of them over the next 6 weeks. But right now we want to turn on, where is it? I'm not seeing the description. Okay, well, it looks like we can add a custom field. Let's try that. Let's see if this works. Again, they updated this functionality a little bit, but I'm going to choose a path. So now we're looking at our full xAPI statements, the actor, verb, object. It's a little out of order, but that's okay. So we know that our description is in the object. We know that it's in the definition object within the object, and then it's the description. That's what we want. So we'll select that, and then let's click, oh yeah, and the English version. So now let's add the field. And we'll close this, and sure enough, here it is. We can't see it very well because my screen is so small. Maybe we get rid of the stored option. So I'll turn off stored, and now here we go. Devlin Peck answered choice C, and it's a question in my sample quiz or a cheat sheet in my sample quiz. So yeah, just kind of figured that out really quick. I hope everyone was able to follow, but you see that dot notation. We didn't have it over here, but they do give us access to any part of the statement that we want to show here because it lets us just drill into it on our own, which is actually really cool functionality. I like that. I'm going to hop back over and see if there's any questions in the chats. And you have custom fields not from that list. Oh, cool. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Was anyone else trying to follow along? And if so, is your statement sending successfully or is it giving you any trouble? And that is what I wanted to show you today. I mean, I can also dive into context. We're not going to do really hands-on with that, but I can show you it and try to break it down. That's something that I didn't start using until this year, but it is actually a really cool part of xAPI. Okay, if you're not seeing anything in Veracity, let me show you what you want to do. So this is some of the most useful stuff for troubleshooting. So this is the old one. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Whenever anyone, if you're reaching out to me for help sending a statement or something's not working, here's what I want you to do. Press F12 when you're on this screen. And if that's not an option for you for whatever reason, or you rebounded those keys, you can right click anywhere on the storyline player, click on inspect, and then select console. So don't worry about what's up here. Select one of these and then tell me what comes up in the console. So basically what happens in the console when you try to fire off one of those xAPI statements? 9 times out of 10, that whatever error message comes up here will tell us what the problem is so that we can solve it. Or at least it will tell us where to look. So so Sam, maybe check your console and let me know what it says, and that could be a good that could be a good learning opportunity to see how we can actually do this troubleshooting on our own, or how we know where to look for the problem. While you're doing that, I do want to show off context a little bit. So context is more complex. Again, we're back in this xAPI statement from my XAPI challenges app. And if anyone, for those of you who haven't checked that out, I think you're in a really good spot to do so. xapi.devlinpeck.com. There's basically just a quick quiz associated with each of these tutorials that you all have been participating in for the last few weeks. And for ones like this, it's in addition to a quiz, it's actually a statement sending challenge. So you have to actually send an xAPI statement to one of my learning record stores, and it will automatically give you credit in the app. So it's pretty cool. Check that out. But here's some behind the scenes for that. Maybe I should show you. This will make more sense. Okay. So we're at xapi.devlinpeck.com. I'm going to show it full screen. Here's the leaderboard I was talking about. We have a few people who did all 10 challenges. But let me dive into a challenge. So say you want to do the write an xAPI statement challenge. Once you get in there, you have an option to take the quiz. And this is a storyline quiz. And knows my email. Cool. So, and whenever someone submits one of these options, that's when this code right here gets fired off, the send answered option. Because again, this is storyline. I use the same approach I'm showing all of you in this series to collect this data. Now, I have the actor's name, again, just like I showed you all, the verb. You all know how to do this. This is exactly what we've done. Same thing with the object. We just did that today. The object type, the type of activity, the object description. I just named that parameter a little bit differently. So you're literally all up to speed with this part. Okay, everyone can do this who's in this call if you've been following along. The result one, like I was saying, this is where we want to hold the user's response. So we're going to get there in a later session. It's going to be really easy if you've been following along. And in that first session, we even dove into this in depth, and that was pretty advanced stuff for a first xAPI session. So that'll be easy for you all when we get there, I think. Now, context, I didn't originally include this. This isn't included anywhere in my xAPI tutorial series. So I thought this session would be a good time to maybe give you all a preview of it. So it is more complex. It does use an array or arrays. But let me just show you what's going on here. Actually, I think this might be better. Context, activity, deep dive. So xapi.com, I've mentioned them before. I always use their resources. Let me post this in the chat for anyone who might want to do some reading on this afterwards. But here's where we see what properties we would include. So in the context object, we would include this context activities object. Okay, so let me show you that here. So we add the context object. You can add this. To the code we've already been making. So right after this object is complete, we would add a context object. And feel free to follow along with this if you want, but this isn't something we're going to add parameters for and stuff. And it's not something that's going to be the same for every selection. So, you can follow along just to get a better understanding of this object, but you're not going to want to include this in your final code, as it stands at least. So once you have that context object, we're going to add a context activities object. And as you can probably tell by the context, no pun intended, what this object is going to do is it's going to tell us how this activity is related to other activities in this experience. So, you saw the first one here is parent, okay? So the first key in the key value pairs is going to be parent. And that's going to say what the parent object is, or what the parent objects are, plural, which is why we're going to use an array here. Okay, this is going to be new for you all if you have been following along. An array is a list, okay, and it uses these regular angular square brackets. I'm going to give you a quick example down here. So we're going to make a variable, let pets equal, and then we'll make a list. So dog, say I have a dog, a cat, and a parrot, okay? So this is pretty familiar to you all. I mean, we're adding basically multiple items to an object with these curly brackets. You can also do the same for these arrays. And you can have an array of objects too. So watch this. So let's say I have a dog named Fido. And we can add a comma after that, and we'll add another object. Say I have a cat named Sneaky. So you get the idea. So these brackets are just saying we're going to have a list of things within them. Okay. For the parent, we just have one parent here, but to keep it consistent with the xAPI format, it does need to be in an array. And once we make it down that far, again, we're having an object inside of this array since it can be multiple things. So we've started the list. Now we're going to add the object. And again, this is why I wanted to build it from scratch and just give you some exposure to it, because it does get really nested here. We have the context object, within that the context activities object, and then this parent list. And inside of this list, we can have objects. And in those objects, it's basically going to be what we have here, okay? So we're saying what kind of, it's going to be between these. We're just saying what the parent activity or object is for this. And just to make this clear, all you need to have is the ID and the object type, and the LRS will connect the rest of the dots for you. So since the user is answering a question here in my xAPI challenges quiz, the parent is the quiz itself. And I use some JavaScript to get this, don't worry about that. But here's where you would put the object ID for the quiz itself, whereas this statement, I'm using an ID for the specific question. Let me go and show you. Oh, I actually pass it from Storyline, and I don't have that pulled up right now, so I can't show you. But let me give you another quick example. Say that the question ID is example.com/quiz1/question1. Okay, say I have multiple quizzes, and in each quiz there are multiple questions. The parent for this question would be the ID for the quiz itself. So the parent ID would be example.com/quiz1. Again, just want to give you some quick exposure to that. I hope that makes sense. I'm sure there are questions. And I just wanted to comment on this grouping one too. So once this list of parent activities is done, you would add a comma, and you can also add this grouping element. Again, this word is defined by the xAPI spec, and you can include other activity types that aren't direct parents to this quiz question, for example. So I put the URL for the entire app, since you can actually use these IDs to query the LRS down the line. So say I want to see all of the xAPI statements associated with this app. As long as I have this ID here in the grouping, I'll be able to make a query like that down the road, and I'll be able to see, all of the statements, not only when people answered specific questions, but also when people passed or failed the quizzes, which are the parents to the questions. Again, I've rambled on a bit there. I hope people are able to follow that. Feel free to ask follow-up questions. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this context object that we added. I just wanted to, give some exposure to that. The resource I linked is really good if you want to, if sometime down the line you want to figure out how to use that object, it is there. And I'm sure I'll do tutorials on it in the future, but right now I don't have any up, so this might be your only exposure to it at first. All right, so how are we doing, everybody? So that's the error you got. Okay, so Sam got a message in the console. You see there it says JavaScript send statement is not defined. So what that means is his when he's executing that code in Storyline, it's not communicating with the send statement function in his JavaScript file. So that could mean a couple of things. It could mean one, the story.html file isn't linked correctly to the xAPI statement.javascript file, or it could mean that the send statement function is called something different in your xAPI statement.javascript file. So I would look at those two things. Make sure in your JavaScript file, your function is named exactly send statement with that capital S there. And two, make sure that your story.html file links to that JavaScript file that holds your function, and make sure that everything is saved before opening it and trying to execute it. Oh, we have a question over here. Are prior live workshops archived on your site? Yes, they are. They're actually on the crowd. You can access them from the resources page on my site or just on my Crowdcast channel. They're all there, and as soon as we're done, as soon as we're done with the session, you can access the recording. I think it takes like 10 minutes to upload or something like that, but yeah, Crowdcast is a pretty cool platform. It takes care of all of that for you. Cool, thanks, Brian. Again, we didn't learn how to do anything super exciting in this session, but it is some foundational information. You do want to include that additional activity info so that when other people are looking at your statements, it makes a bit more sense. Can you see my statement on Storyline, please? Sure. I'll actually just paste this in the chat. Okay, Nicole. So yes, I would say check the same thing. Make sure all the files are saved. Make sure it's linked appropriately, and make sure that function is called the same thing in both places. Is anyone else getting any errors, or if you were following along and did get this working successfully, let me know in the chat too. And again, if you don't want to speak up and you don't want to reach out for help, but you aren't able to figure it out, I do have these tutorials on my website. So it's just resources, and I have this the full guide to xAPI and Storyline. This is where all of these tutorials are linked from, and this is like the outline we're following for these live streams. So right here, we're on week 4, collect activity info. Next week, we're collecting text responses. So that one's going to be pretty cool. We're going to have a question like, what feedback do you have about this course or something? And we'll have a big text box, and then whatever the user enters there, we'll actually capture in the xAPI statement. So that will be really cool. We're going to do that next week, and the week after, we're finally gonna fix up this quiz and make it actually, collect the quiz score info appropriately. And after that, it's my favorite of all time, measuring duration. It's so cool to see how long someone's spending answering your question, and how long someone's spending on the quiz, how long they're spending looking at the cheat sheet. It's really cool to use that information and get a really good idea of, how people are experiencing your course. Oh, I just realized I haven't been sharing my screen this whole time. That's awesome. But yeah, I just wanted to show this page. Here's the full guide to xAPI and Storyline, and I do have all these articles linked here. These are all tutorials. It doesn't go as in depth as we do here, but I mean, if you need a reference to follow along with, it's all here. Cool. Yeah. Oh yeah, catch up. That'll be good. It's only going to get better from here. So yeah, everyone who's made it to this one and who's going to be coming to the next ones, you guys are the troopers. I'm assuming everyone here is, seen the first one. So you're basically going to know everything I know about sending these custom xAPI statements. Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, spent a lot of time on that redesign, and it's been working quite well for me since it's been up the last couple of months. But thanks. I used Webflow too, if anyone's curious or unfamiliar with it. But again, thank you all for coming. If you are getting value out of these, consider donating. It does cost a lot to keep it running. I'd also love to see more people in the XAPI Challenges app. I mean, I know those of you here have some really deep knowledge, whether you know it or not, and whether it still seems confusing or not. I mean, you're really, really far ahead of the average e-learning developer, I would say. So hop in the Challenges app. I have a Slack channel too where people ask for help with xAPI stuff and all of that good stuff. So if you're on my mailing list, you're already in there probably. But yeah, I mean, I love xAPI stuff. Always happy to help. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out and send me screenshots of all your files and your console. Happy to help out with that. And I will hopefully see you all next week if you can make it.